The administration asserts on the one hand that a broad-based amnesty covering millions of aliens illegally in the United States is sorely needed because our immigration system is broken beyond repair. They assert that the amnesty will permit a setting of the immigration clock back to zero so that legislators can craft new policies and processes to ensure that we will never need another amnesty again. On the other hand, though, the administration also asserts that border and interior immigration enforcement have never been so thorough, so robust, and so far-reaching. Neither assertion is empirically provable based on the available information and evidence. But putting that aside just for a moment, it's only when you put both of those assertions in juxtaposition and consider them that the illogic of making both assertions at the same time becomes obvious. If our immigration system is so irreparably broken, how can the federal officers who are responsible for immigration matters, both at the border and in the interior, possibly be doing such a bang-up job? But to go back to each assertion standing on its own merits, not only is each unproven and unprovable, but one of them, the assertion that border and interior enforcement have never been so superlative, is demonstrably false, as Jessica has found and pointed out. It's notable that the administration has worked so hard to withhold the statistics that Jessica has presented, and many others as well, from public view, and not just with Jessica, but many other groups on both spectrums of the immigration debate as well. They have gone to extreme lengths and fought lengthy and shockingly expensive Freedom of Information Act lawsuits in court to avoid providing the statistics. One example of such litigation occurred in the Southern District of New York over the Secure Communities program. Such attempts to fight or obstruct disclosure through litigation have in nearly every instance failed, as they did with the Secure Communities suit. And so how has the administration reacted? First, they still withhold data because they know that not everyone has the deep pockets needed to file and to sustain long-lasting lawsuits in federal court to force the disclosures. Second, in several instances, they have simply stopped collecting or reporting on sensitive data that they fear will make them look bad or that can be used against them. A case in point being the number of denials of applications and petitions filed with USCIS, the benefits granting arm of the Department of Homeland Security. And third, where enforcement actions are concerned, they've gone beyond spin, right down to statistical manipulation to try to make the data say what they want it to say. Among the most glaring examples of that manipulation is the never-before-permitted practice of letting the Interior Enforcement Arm, ICE, adopt Border Patrol apprehensions if they hold the alien even for so long as an hour in one of their border detention facilities, such as El Paso or Port Isabel, for the purpose of removal. This then permits ICE to claim the removal as their own, even though they did absolutely nothing to locate, detect, or actually take into custody the alien in question. And it is only this practice that has permitted ICE to tout record levels of removals. And it was only after some diehard skeptics and a few journalists began to dig into the numbers that then ICE Director John Morton was obliged to deny that his agency had, quote, cooked the books, and resulted in the president acknowledging that the numbers were, quote, a little bit deceptive. We have to assume that this substantial change in policy in how the statistics are counted was directed at senior levels of the Department of Homeland Security, given that it involved fundamentally altering the work measures of two distinct, large, and very complex organizations, each, if left to its own devices, with a vested interest in showing the highest possible productivity. For over 100 years, both the Border Patrol and the interior enforcement agents involved in law enforcement have hewn to the well-tested fisherman's principle: if you catch him, you clean him. Translated into enforcement work, the principle means that a case, with all of its paperwork and all of its attendant tedium, but also with all of its statistical strength, belongs uniquely to the agency that effected the apprehension in the first place. Why would the administration have endorsed, or at minimum condoned, such a practice which smacks of deceit? The answer seems to me to be self-evident. Bloating ICE statistics was intended to help the administration make the case that interior enforcement has never been better. It has also had, from their point of view, the delightful corollary effect of permitting the administration to point to lower Border Patrol removal statistics as proof that the border, too, is more secure than ever. And combining both premises together has permitted the administration to publicly argue the logical but false syllogism that these ingredients are exactly what is needed to be in place to convince conservatives and the enforcement-minded that an amnesty can be undertaken with no significant adverse future effects on curbing illegal immigration. Not surprisingly, the administration's manipulations have succeeded, at least to some degree, in influencing the debate. This is frankly because they count on the glaze-over factor. They know that when policymakers, wonks, special interest groups, or whomever start speaking about immigration, many, if not most Americans' eyes start to glaze over. They figure it's too complicated to understand, or that they're going to be lied to anyway. And so this glaze-over factor inevitably works to the advantage of the statistical manipulators. But if you really want to understand how seriously all of this heightened border and interior enforcement is taken, look to those who are most directly affected: aliens who are illegally in the United States, or those who are contemplating illegal entry. Because unlike the American public, they have a direct and keen interest in going beyond press releases and pontification to see what's really going on. And in that singular instance, the statistics don't lie. 27% of the aliens that the Border Patrol arrest have been previously deported. 24% of the aliens arrested by ICE agents in the interior have also been previously deported. Think about that. 1 out of every 4 aliens arrested, whether directly at the border or in the interior throughout the continental United States, has been removed previously. They're obviously not being deterred by the tough talk. And given that the policy priority of this administration is the deportation of criminals, there's every reason to think that many of those prior deports who work their way back to the United States, most especially those who elude the Border Patrol and ICE and end up in our communities, are felons. Despite all of the government's manipulations, Jessica has also managed to ferret out from the statistics the very disturbing fact that ICE removals are plummeting nationwide, down by 20% from last federal year, 2012, and headed further south. Even more disturbing is that one of ICE's 2 major divisions, Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI, now accounts for only 4% of the immigration workload. The dirty little secret here is that the forced merger into ICE of U.S. Customs and Immigration and Naturalization Service plainclothes agents never took hold. Neither the senior officials at ICE nor its parent at Department of Homeland Security have shown the leadership capability that is required to forge a new organizational identity that incorporates both important facets of work. Instead, HSI has become the refuge of former customs agents, many of whom disdain immigration work. Thus, a mini-customs mindset has developed within HSI division, leaving only enforcement and removal operations within ICE to conduct immigration enforcement operations throughout the United States. And there is little, if any, integration of the two divisions horizontally across this dysfunctional agency. And this reference to dysfunction leads me back to the administration's premise for comprehensive reform, which is the catchphrase used to embody amnesty, a word that they strive never to use. The administration would have us believe that the system is so broken that comprehensive reform is absolutely critical to setting things to rights. I don't dispute that there is a great deal of dysfunction, but it seems to me that much of that dysfunction is a self-inflicted wound. I'm reminded of the overconfident man who starts tinkering with his finely tuned, extremely complex Swiss watch. Just a little at first, but before you know it, all of the cogs, the springs, and mechanisms are scattered about on his desk, at which point he complains that his timepiece no longer works. Consider, at the beginning of the administration, then DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano sent her friend and confidant, Dora Shriro, over to work with Director Morton at ICE so that they could develop policies to ameliorate the harshness of conditions for aliens held in detention pending hearing and removal. The consequence was a series of policy decisions significantly restricting the use of detention in favor of other alternatives. But as Jessica has noted, there are now substantially more than 800,000 alien fugitives in this country who have fled from their proceedings rather than face deportation. Such a huge number staggers the mind. Close to 1 million aliens who have made a mockery of our system because they were not detained and obviously had no significant restraints upon them to mitigate the chance that they would flee. If this were the criminal justice system, there would be howls of outrage from our political leaders and dismay from the public at large. But because this deals with immigration, it escapes largely unnoticed. It seems clear to me that when senior officials begin tinkering with the cogs and springs of our immigration system, they should have some idea of what they're about. It also seems clear to me that when new policies are set in place with the potential to go awry, there should be metrics to measure whether the new policies are having the right effect or whether they are skewing other equally important portions of the system at play. But finally, it also appears clear to me that when tinkering with detention policies, the impact on the other portions of the system, such as proper functioning of the immigration courts or the integrity of the removal system, were never a priority consideration for officials in this administration because, in their view, to put humane and detention into the same sentence is an oxymoron. The intent was never to create policies that balanced the requirement to accord individuals their humanity and respect while yet ensuring that the immigration system didn't falter under an overwhelming burden of no-shows who melt into the country and disappear. Just as former DHS Secretary Michael Chertoff made his signal immigration policy the end of catch and release, Secretary Napolitano determined to make hers the end of catch and release and be damned with the consequences. This willingness to treat the immigration law, regulations, and policies as silly putty is equally evident in the administration's misuse of prosecutorial discretion as a method of flushing tens of thousands of cases from the immigration courts and removal system. It's not, in the long run, in the best interests of those aliens who have no permanent capacity to remain or live and work legally. They live in an immigration limbo, and this is a situation that the administration has been willing to bet on at those aliens' expense will translate into amnesty if it can only burden the system so onerously that in the end it does break. This should not be allowed to happen. Serious enforcement measures are needed to prevent another buildup of illegal aliens, such as did happen since the passage of the much ballyhooed but now discredited Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, which has come to be understood universally as a failure where curbing illegal entry to the United States is concerned. And there is nothing at all in the Senate reform bill that would give comfort to those of us who are concerned with the need for immigration law enforcement in the interior. Instead, there is the same tired old effort at throwing huge amounts of cash and positions at the Border Patrol as a sop to public opinion. But this will do little to fix our immigration problem. Over 40%, nearly half of the aliens illegally in the U.S. originally entered legally through ports of entry such as Dulles International, JFK, O'Hare, LAX, and Miami International. You could stand Border Patrol agents shoulder to shoulder along both the northern and southern physical frontiers like a human picket fence, and their presence would do nothing to stop future visa violators and overstays. But even if there were significant interior enforcement provisions in the Senate bill, when you think about comprehensive immigration reform, you have to ask yourself whether you can really trust the administration to show balance between amnesty and even the smallest, most token effort in enforcing the law. I don't. Having achieved amnesty, there is no reason to believe that the administration will do anything differently than they have already done with regard to immigration enforcement, which is fundamentally to dismantle it while playing sleight of hand with statistics. Establishing integrity and credible enforcement in the immigration system is not among their core values. It is not a pressing priority. And by the time the American public wakes up to the duplicity of another broad-based amnesty, coupled with shadow enforcement measures that never quite take effect, only to find in another decade or two that there is once again a logjam of illegal aliens whiling away their time waiting for another serial amnesty, the leaders responsible will be long gone. Who will we hold accountable then? So my question to the Congress, and most particularly to the House of Representatives, is this: why go along with such a sham? Why give open borders advocates an easy victory when it is so clearly contrary to the country's interest?